We're live.
Okay, we are live. This is Senate Finance, February 26th. And for those that have been wondering where we've been for the last 2 hours, this is the first half of the session is winding down. Bills are making their way out, and we were on the floor a lot longer than anticipated. We've been there for less than a half an hour. And there was 2 hours plus today, so we are behind. But we will try and make that up. We have canceled. We were actually going to do our first walk through 274, which is sales and use tax exemption for fuels in a residence for domestic use. I think I know what the tax department's going to tell us about that one, but we have canceled them. They were here at 1:30. So we are on to a continued discussion for 282. And we had asked I think the last estimate was and I'm not even sure which configuration, but we were raising like 80 million, depending on where we draw lines. But wondering, the bill puts that money in to a school construction fund. And it's been a long time since we've done any school construction in this building. My first year, we stopped doing school construction, and that was a long time ago. So my question is, that isn't a lot of money in the scope of school construction. I think we've heard 600 million plus for Burlington. I know, no,
600 million?
I thought that this
That was
number.
like 200.
No, our bond was for 165.
Okay, what was the total cost?
Project.
Well, the total cost was 211.
Okay, so if that goes into a fund, assume it would be in the treasurer's office. And we can't commit to, we can't put the full faith and credit of the state behind this. You've been clear. And my understanding is we would help buy down debt service as money became available. So that 80 million would go to buy down debt service in 1 year. Would it be spread across? Would it be first come, first serve, and then the next year the school district would be on the hook again? I guess how is that structured?
All right, so Scott Baker with Treasurer's Office. David Shearer, Deputy Treasurer, should be here soon. He was here.
He was here, I know.
Yeah, sorry. So our understanding was we have a basic overview of bonding has to be in the state, how it works. Some of it relates to potential school construction bonding, the task force and that I can go through that or not, or.
Okay, yeah, I think if you go through it, we've got a lot of visitors in the room, so while we're waiting for David, that might be helpful.
Okay.
Refresh all of our members.
Do have hard copies here.
Okay, do we have
Yeah, David was also going to share the
David
screen, so.
going
he
to
can
share a
that.
screen? Okay,
But
so we gotta work on it.
You do have
It
it
is
all.
on our
It
website.
is on the website.
Charlotte, can you share that on
I'm
the
sleeping.
screen for the website? Is that possible?
I'm not supposed to.
You're not supposed to? Okay. We won't get you.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, wait, I've got.
Thank you.
And for anyone that has a computer with them, it's under
It's under my stuff.
legislative website. If you go to committees and hit Senate Finance, it will come up. Okay,
So I'll go quickly since some of it's basic, but stop me at If you have any
You're
questions.
saved.
Oh, you're saved.
Sorry about that.
We understand you have the PowerPoint,
I do have it
the
right.
power of the PowerPoint.
Yes.
So pull up a chair. Then you can introduce yourself to the record.
For the record, David Chair, Deputy Treasurer, and I apologize for being a few minutes late here.
No, we apologize. We are now on legislative time.
I understand. All right, I'm just gonna pull up the PowerPoint and start and proceed in just 1 second here.
While we're waiting, that's a question. What are we trying to determine here in terms of the bill that we have in front of us and then this?
Well, I think as I just said, this will do an 2000. Look at just how does bonding work? But my question was, what kind of impact will this money have? And are we committing to covering somebody's bonded indebtedness for 10 years? Or are we just saying, we'll give you whatever comes in, and I don't know, how will it get divided up? I mean, will it end up being $1,000 a school, which won't help a whole lot? Or how that system works? Or do you just make a blanket payment? This is the state's bonded indebtedness, it won't buy it down with the go rates.
Would we need another piece of legislation to actually disperse the funds?
And I believe, and we will go through it, Act 73 has about 20 pages governing this fund, which was skipped over every time it was discussed because we knew we had no money. But there is a law right now that governs how this money, if and when we find it, will be governed. So it is in there. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So the amount of debt that the state issues, it all starts with CDAC, the Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee. That's made up of the state treasurer, secretary of administration, the executive director of the municipal bond bank, 2 governor appointees, a treasurer's appointee, and there are 2 non-voting members, the state auditor and the legislative economist. They meet annually. CDAC was created in statute in 1989. They annually look at number of debt metrics. They issue a report by September 30th to the governor and the state legislature about how much debt may prudently be issued each year. They look at a lot of debt metrics, specifically debt per capita, debt service as a percent of revenues, and debt outstanding as a percentage of personal income. They're also looking at other long-term liabilities like pension and OPEB liabilities. That's more in the focus of the rating agencies these days. Although their recommendation is advisory, the governor and the legislature have always abided by that number. That's something that the rating agencies have put a lot of faith in, give us a lot of credit for having that independent committee in the legislature following that. This tells you some of the things that they consider: the amount of net tax supported debt outstanding. They look at they do 10-year projections. They look at these debt metrics 10 years out. They look at debt service requirements, other criteria that the rating agencies use, the impact of capital spending, other things that are moral obligation, which we'll talk about a little bit later, those types of things. The next slide shows, so Vermont's bond ratings, we're rated by 3 rating agencies: Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. We're rated the second highest on all, by all three rating agencies. AAA is the highest that you can receive. We're AA1 by Moody's, AA plus by Fitch and S&P.
And this is important because,
The higher ratings, result in lower interest costs when we go out to bond. Not only for the state's debt, but any agency that relies on the moral obligation of the state, the bond bank, VSAT, VHFA, UBM, when they go out and bond.
when you're doing X% over a 20-year bond, it's a lot of money.
It makes a difference, right? And yeah, we have a debt service schedule in here that will show you how much interest it actually costs us. So whenever we go out and do a bond issue, we go through the rating agency, we meet with them, go through all that. We also meet with them annually, in times that we're not bonding. We did go out with an issue in December of 2025, so we met with them in November. All three agencies affirmed our second highest rating, which was important. This next slide shows where we are. You see the Vermont in green. It shows that we are the second highest rating by all three rating agencies. The first set of columns, those are all the AAA rated agencies. There are actually right now 17 states that have at least 2 AAA ratings. When CDAC looks at all the debt metrics, we benchmark ourselves against the other AAA rated states. Even though we are not AAA at this point, at times we've had a AAA rating, that is where we would like to be, where we would get the lowest cost of funds. So that's what
Former treasurer was really focused.
yes, that's true. That's true. Although, you know, when we do go out, because Vermont's a small state, we do not have a lot of issuers within the state. There is a lot of demand for our bonds, and we often price as if we're a AAA rated state.
Okay, so demand means people buy them.
Correct.
And the other users, there's the state of Vermont, if we build a building. And then municipalities go through the municipal bond bank, right? And schools go through the municipal bond bank, and they are all tied to the state's rating as a whole.
Yes, correct. The majority of the debt that the bond bank has the moral obligation of the state.
Right.
Also has, there's a state intercept in place that we put in place several years ago. Whereas if there were a municipality or school district that did not make their payments, all of their payments, the treasurer's office could actually intercept any state payments directly to that municipality and send it to the bond bank to cover that shortfall.
And I'm doing some of this because we have an audience.
Yes.
Full faith and credit of the state means the state is obligated. Basically, we have the ability to raise taxes, to raise revenue, and we are guaranteeing that we will get the revenue to pay the bond. Moral obligation means we think it's a good deal, but we aren't legally obligated. We're kind of morally obligated. We wouldn't get a good bond rating if we didn't. But it's a degree of legal responsibility really to pay those bonds.
Right. Correct. If one of those agencies that has a bond backed by the moral law of the state, they would come to the legislature and ask to cover that debt service payment. And you're correct. It's a moral obligation. It would not be a good idea to not.
No.
Yeah, we wouldn't be in the bond market very long. So this slide shows the other AAA rated states. Again, any state that has at least two AAA ratings, we benchmark against. These are the 17 states that we compared to. So this slide shows our debt per capita, one of the metrics that we look at in comparison to our peer group of AAA rated states. And you can see we're the sixth highest debt per capita among those states. Partly, we're a small state, the population is small. This is out of all the debt metrics that we look at, this is probably the least important that the rating agencies look at. And again, because we're small, we don't always abide by our guidelines. I'll show you our guidelines in a moment. The next slide shows where we get as a percentage of personal income, basically how much the affordability for each person, for taxpayers in the state, how much debt it costs them. And you can see where not the highest, we're a little bit below the middle again, this is just the AAA rated states. The next slide will show where we are among all 50 states. And you can see this is the ranking. Higher is better. Right now we're 25, so we're right in the middle, debt per capita and debt as a percent of personal income among the 50 states. But you can see, back in 2011-12, we were ranked higher. Other states have issued less debt in the last several years. And so our rankings fallen a little bit, but we're still kind of right.
And we were doing some pay go. I remember that term being thrown around. We were trying to avoid doing bonding for a while and using cash because with the COVID money, we had some cash. I remember I think we built the Springfield prison once. There was one other time we had a lot of cash and we built things rather than bonding, rather than going into debt if we had the cash. But so if we start to fall, we try and take corrective measures. Should have.
Just a clarification, is this, looking at this right here, state debt per capita?
Yeah.
Is that just state borrowing or would that be inclusive of BSAC or municipalities or?
This is just the state.
Just
debt.
state, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And there are a few things that go into it. We'll get to that. But
Okay.
yeah, basically
It's
just
triple.
the debt of the state. Doesn't include more law.
Okay.
Okay, so the next slide shows the three basic debt metrics that the CDAC looks at. The first column, debt per capita. See the top half of the charts, the last 10 years history, and the bottom shows 10-year projections going out. And CDAC assumes that we issue the same amount of debt each year for the next 10 years. And we have state guidelines. You can see debt per capita, set a state guideline of the 5-year average of the other AAA rated states, and we try to keep within that. It's shaded because we are out of compliance with the state guideline and debt per capita. And as I mentioned, this is probably the least important metric that we look at. The other two, debt as a percent of personal income and debt as a percentage of state revenues. They set the guidelines. Those are kind of volatile. When you look at the other states, we kind of bounce around. But we set CDAC sets a guideline at 1.8% personal income and 4% for debt as a percent of revenues. And you can see we've been in compliance with that guideline for the last 10 years, and 10-year projections show that we're still in compliance with those. So as we talked about, so when Vermont issues debt, anything in the capital bill that we bond for, we issue general obligation bonds. And again, that's the full faith and credit of the state, and it's payable from any cash or revenues that the state has. We issue 20-year bonds, that's in statute, and they are 20-year maturities and equal or diminishing maturities for 20 years. So if we issued $100 million bond, we would have 5 million maturing each year for 20 years. We have issued special obligation bonds in the past. We had the transportation infrastructure bonds. We issued those in 2010, 12, and 13. Those were 3 small issues totaling $36 million, and they went basically to the transportation fund. Statute's a little bit different. They allow for 30-year bonds in that, although we issued only 20-year bonds for those. And those they're called special obligation bonds because there was a gas tax assessment. 2% tacked on to a gallon of gas or 3 cents per diesel. And only the revenues from those collections were pledged.
Tax, I know it didn't go through this committee. Senator Mazza said they needed it.
Yes. Anyways, I wanted to mention those as we're talking about school construction bonds. Some of the mentioned, it could be potentially be a special obligation bond rather than.
Okay, give me,
That's one.
beat it up a little bit.
Right. We did pay off all the TIBs back in 2022. They had been maturing. We had cash a few years ago. We directed some cash to pay those off.
Right.
So this chart shows the state's net tax supported debt and moral obligation debt. So included in the state's net tax supported debt that the rating agencies look at, we have our general obligation bonds, about $550 million outstanding. Back in 2018, we had a housing bond. It was about 50 million back then. The HFA actually issued it, but the first $2.5 million of property transfer tax receipts every year get sent to the HFA to pay the debt service on that. At the time, we were trying to avoid putting it on the state's books as net tax supported debt. We went through a lot of iterations. In the end, the rating agencies are including it because it's a transfer of actual property transfer tax receipts. So that is included in their net tax supported debt. They also include any leases or SBIT, basically.
And so
Soft,
sign
yeah,
a
IT
building
contract.
for offices.
Right.
That is a debt, okay.
Right. So even though our GO debt is only 550 million, there's about 663 million that are on our books for the net tax supported debt. The bottom shows the agencies that are able to use the moral obligation of the state. There's a maximum in statute that they can use. Not all of it's being used at this point. You can see there's about 890 million outstanding debt. And the way the moral law works, it's a little bit different. It's basically a pledge to reimburse the debt service reserve fund. So if there was a debt service payment due that the bond bank couldn't cover, they would cap their reserve fund, pay that year's debt service, and ask the state to reimburse, to replenish the debt service fund. So it wouldn't be the full amount of the bond, just the amount of the debt service for that year. And many years of it. So this chart shows the amount of debt authorization going back to 2000 for the last 20 years. And again, this is the CDAC recommendation starting in 2012. We went to a biennium recommendation, so that just shows, we just split that in half. So the 2026-27 recommendation was for 100 million or $50 million per year. And you can see the amount of debt authorization has been declining.
Yeah.
For the past several years.
And this is not adjusted for inflation. This is just raw.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, right. And this is just the amount of authorization, not necessarily the amount we issued.
Okay.
We have quite a bit of authorized but unissued debt. Anything that goes in the capital bill, those projects are authorized to spend, but we won't go out and bond until that money is going to be spent. We go out to ask all the departments every year saying,
So you don't bond until it's been through permitting and
correct, right,
you want to,
Yeah.
it's shovel ready before you let
right.
it bond.
First, we don't want to bond and pay interest if we're not using it. Secondly, there are a lot of tax laws that you can't just go out and issue tax exempt bonds and sit on the money and reinvest it at a higher rate. Yeah, it's doesn't.
Oh, that's like a trash thing.
Oh, yes, okay, so this slide, it's at the end of it, but you can see it on the screen. The green bars show the actual amount of authorized but unissued debt. And one of the reasons that CDEC has not been, has had fairly low authorizations the last few years is we're just not spending the money. Part of it during COVID, there were, supply chain issues, couldn't find people to go out and build the capital projects. And a lot of the projects just are several year projects. So even though we only have 550 million of outstanding geo debt, there's, 192 million of authorized debt that if every project was being built now, we would be bonding for that.
So we've authorized a lot more than we've actually spent. All right.
Right. So, I mentioned before that, historically, they've looked at the, CDEC has looked at the debt metrics, basically just the outstanding debt. The rating agency is now focusing on the long-term liabilities, basically the net pension and OPEB liabilities. And the amount of debt is small compared to the amount of long-term liabilities on our books. So this shows where we rank among the 50 states, and the low number is bad. You don't want to be one because that's number one. But that shows adjusted net pension liability as a percent of personal income, and revenues and per capita. And then adjusted net pension liability as own source revenue. Own source revenue is basically all of our receipts minus your federal funding. So it's
But that's why it's so important to keep the pension fund paid up and to be
correct, right,
filling it for the years that we did not behave well.
right. And ANOL is adjusted net OPEB liability.
Okay.
And it's adjusted because when the rating agencies look at this, all states use a different assumed discount rate and all. So they look at all pension funds, put everybody at the same assumed rate of return. So they adjust it just so they can compare apples to apples for all of the states. This is just kind of, again, shows where we rank among our peers. You can see we're like third highest among the peers. The bottom shows where we rank among the 50. We're still like, 7, 8, 9. So still fairly high. You can see that on the next chart. This shows liabilities as a percent of our own source revenue for all the states. You can see the color coding, the blue, where it shows the top, that's our debt. You can see that's a small portion of our OPEB net pension and OPEB liabilities. So that's where
I think as we're filling up with the next two things, if we manage to raise 80 million, $100 million for school construction, how will that just be money that you sit on until a school or schools bonds. And then will that money be parceled out year by year, or will it? That's, I think, the question. What happens to, how does that money get dealt with in there?
Yeah, I mean, when you do an issue, there is a, size does matter. You don't want to have a lot of small issues that, you know, the bond investors want big blocks of bonds, so.
Okay,
This shows, $100 million issue, how much it would cost.
now that's probably not a school roof, so.
This is just a hypothetical kind of at current rates. See, whenever we issue, investors generally want higher coupon, higher interest rates on the bond that they buy. So we, a lot of times will issue at 5% interest rates. We're not, because we're paying 5% interest, the bond investors are going to pay us more. If they're buying a $1 million bond, they're gonna pay us more than $1 million because we're gonna give them a higher interest rate. So we raise what's called a bond premium. And that premium goes towards projects. So it's to get $100 million of project proceeds, this would show we only have to issue about $89.7 million of bonds. The difference is the premium. So because we're paying higher interest, we get that difference up front. So it's $100 million of proceeds, even though there are $89 million of bonds, but we end up paying, you know, $47 million of interest over the 20 years. So 100 million costs us an extra 36, almost $37 million in interest payments over the 100 years. And again, there are tax laws, so you can't just issue and sit on the money. So if, you know, if we were going to issue for that, I mean, it's up
Well, I guess
to,
if the school owns 100 million to do whatever, they're gonna need the money to pay the contractor to do the roof, for the roof, whatever it is. You will let that $100 million bond go. We raise 80 million a year. Does that 80 million pay down the debt in 1 year? And I'm wondering how would you deal? Because my understanding last year was you can't use full faith and credit to bond. So we're into the moral obligation world. If we raise X million, once you've got a whole bunch of schools maybe raising, or maybe we build a new school, will that, what will happen to that 80 million? Will it go in as a one-time payment? Will to buy down the total package of bonds? Will it be parsed out on a per, now, how? Because we were told when we will help you with the debt service as we find money, or as money becomes available. So how would that work?
okay, let's jump to bonding, I guess. So we'll, when we do a bond issue, if we were doing a GO issue, which we may not want to do that,
Right.
but when we issue, when we will bond to reimburse what we've already spent. So even if we haven't bonded, if they're appropriated in the capital bill, finance and management can give them the money, pay for the projects.
This is a school, so
Okay, right. So whenever we bond, some of it's for reimbursement, some of it's for projected spending.
okay,
going
so the
forward.
school's already spent money to get design and yeah.
So you wouldn't have to bond upfront, basically.
Yeah.
What I'm saying. So. Maybe talk about it right there. Okay. So. When the school construction task force met, they put out a report back in February of 2024. One of the models they looked at was the way Rhode Island bonds for school construction. And they bond through the Rhode Island Health and Educational Building, or RIBEC. RIBEC would be similar to the bond bank. And I think that's the model that, would probably work very well. So instead of the state issuing bonds, I actually have the bond
The
bank.
municipal
issue.
bond bank.
And the way the bond bank does currently works, they loan to municipalities and school districts. So all those municipalities will come to them with their loan requests. Bond bank pools them, issues one bond, and then divvies it up, makes loans to those school municipalities or school districts. The important thing about the Rhode Island model is it's not counted as net tax for debt for the state because it's through RIBEC, and the state does offer subsidies. But it's important that the loans that are made are geo pledges from schools and municipalities in those schools. And there's also an intercept in place, similar to what we have with the bond bank, where the treasurer and intercept payments.
Payment
The
off,
bond
pay
bank.
it off, yeah.
They have an intercept place in Rhode Island. So that's kind of the preferred model.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if we were to go with a model similar to Rhode Island's, then if we raised funds through some mechanism that is yet to be determined, though that money would be used to help pay the subsidy amount so that the school district would be able to borrow at lower cost to the school district. Is that correct?
Yes, right.
Okay.
As Madam Chair talked about earlier, there was a school construction program in place until 2007. There was money in the capital bill every year. It was about
Right.
10 million a year.
I
It
know
was
that.
about a 20% subsidy. One of the important things about the Rhode Island model also, and what we would recommend, because to avoid being net tax supported debt, to have an annual appropriation to pay the debt service, not a pledge up front to cover all of the debt service, but it would be an annual appropriation.
Out of whatever
Right, not
fund
Not a
we set up,
guarantee.
so that would be I assume decided by the appropriations committee somewhere in the budget. That will be made based on how much money is in fund.
right.
Okay,
Just to give you an idea, go back a couple slides. Outstanding debt, yeah. So this came from the bond bank. So the bond bank has the majority of school debt, other than Burlington and Winooski, kind of did it on their own. The rest of this debt, of school districts belongs to the bond bank. So there's about $480 million, we believe.
all right.
There may be some private
Yeah.
loans out there, but I think this pretty much covers it. So this is in Vermont, this is the outstanding debt in Vermont. The next slide shows what that debt service would be. On all, again, this is the legacy debt right now. This is what's outstanding.
Okay, so this is what's still left over like 2007,
No, this is
or anything that's
current debt.
outstanding.
And again, most of this is the bond bank right now,
Yeah.
not what we've
Right.
run through the capital bills. So you see the first year of 2026, total of debt payments is, 61 million. That goes down from there, but so I know there's discussion about what to do about legacy debt. and then what to do with that going forward. So just, this gives you an idea of what is that going to do. So.
In the Rhode Island model, are the local school districts, are they reliant on the Rhode Island legislature appropriating an amount of money every year to subsidize their payment, or do they enter into a contract with RIHBEC or somebody else?
I think they're relying on the annual.
On the annual appropriations, because it would seem to me like if they were reliant on the annual appropriation, they're probably paying a higher interest rate than they would versus if it was a contract.
Well, it does have the geo pledge of the municipalities behind it, so it's a pretty strong rating. And again, if we, similar to the bond bank, the Moralob, it's about one notch below their state rating, so it's still pretty high.
Still pretty high though.
Yeah. Yeah, when we did the TEDs, they were special obligation bonds,
Yeah.
they weren't geo, they were basically a notch below our state rating, so they were still, double A, double A plus, double A, so.
So there's good demand for them.
Towns,
Okay,
states can raise taxes to raise
sure.
the revenue.
yeah.
When Harrisburg, Pennsylvania declared bankruptcy, that sent shockwaves through the insurance industry. I was at that point going to Enfield regularly, and that disrupted that whole, they aren't totally alive, that they go, at least this one went bankrupt. I don't think anyone's gone bankrupt since, many sides that I've gone. But that I remember being there when that got declared, and they were very upset. Okay. Senator Chitman, I see the hand motion.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna ask a question here. Now, what I hear from this and from the chair's question, that we would use these revenues to subsidize the loans through a Rybeck type model. Okay. My question is, if we just restored or reinstituted what some other states still do and what we used to do, and use general obligation debt, pledging the full faith and credit of the great state of Vermont with school debt, would that not just get a lower interest rate without having to come up with that subsidy to get them?
It would be right, it would be higher rated, again, it's gonna show up on the state's books as that tax.
That would,
debt.
but
Which depending on how much it is, well, you saw that the pension and OPEB liabilities are what's driving what the rate we're looking at. So some amount of debt probably wouldn't hurt our ratings. You never know.
I'm just one of 180 legislators, but I would say I want to see more schools built in the state, and I would like that to be cheaper. And so I support reinstating that program to get those better rates so that we're not just raising the taxes over here to subsidize back down to those rates. I think the state of Vermont should pledge our full pledging credit towards
but
these
that
schools.
goes,
We're going to back the bonds.
that goes up. It affects all of those other things, the debt,
We do it.
tax debt, and so the balance you're trying to keep is if we go from triple A or double A to A to B, it's not cheaper, and that's
Working hard for that really good rate, so I want to use that really good rate
Yeah.
to build schools at a cheaper rate.
Yeah.
But I hear you can't just take on all the debt that we
No.
can do, but in a metered, reasonable way over time.
well, how different is the rate for the municipal bank?
Yeah, we want them to rate.
Yes, but how different is the rate going through the municipal bank? You said it's a small amount.
The interest rates?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they're highly rated. Yeah.
it's also highly rated.
Yeah, it's a little bit different credit.
Yeah.
It's the credit of the municipalities behind it, but I mean, they have taxing power and still very highly rated. The task force report that came out in 2024 has some scenarios of different subsidy amounts at, 100 $100 million issue if we subsidized it 20% or 40%, and it kind of gives you those scenarios.
We had that report last year. We will refresh our minds and find the copy. Now that we're seriously in a place where we look at it.
Yeah,
And the only other thing I know is the treasurer is asking some advisors that we use to run some of these scenarios and do some consulting for us to update some of those studies using additional information and numbers and inquiries that we've heard. To try to get more information. We'll be happy to pass that along as that comes into us.
Okay, other questions? Thank you. Thank you for being patient. And Maria should be, she's in the hall. We're going to, we've got S204, which is an act relating to electric ratepayer assistance in utility. And no, we aren't gonna get that one out today because BEPSA wanted to speak, but BEPSA is out of town. Right, not available. Thank you, Kirby.
One part of the bill.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're in the hot seat whenever you're ready.
All right.
And we have had a request from BEPSA, Public Power and Supply, to testify. I told them what we were thinking of doing.
Okay.
But, I'm gonna, Andrea Cohen isn't available this afternoon, so we'll put her on hold as soon as we get back. And then I'm hopeful we're going to vote this one out.
Do you want to start with that? It's 204.
Let's
the
start
amendment,
with
and then-
204. I think that's the simple one. Be nice to have something simple.
Famous last words.
I know, never say the simple little bill. But we just did bonding capacity. So anything after that would be simple.
Second, I'll close it out. Nope, wrong one. So Maria Royal with Woodson Council, and what you're looking at is a proposed strike all amendment to S 204 concerning disconnections of utility service. And all the proposal is an amendment to section 209 of Title 30, which is the scope of jurisdiction of the Public Utility Commission. They have rulemaking authority as noted there on subdivision 1. And so the proposal here is a new subdivision 2, basically specifying that PUC shall amend Rule 3.300 concerning disconnection of residential gas, electric, and water service to include residential customer protections related to utility service disconnections and reconnections during periods of extreme heat, as defined by the commission.
And this was the bill that had us setting up a ratepayer utility fund that had us do it. And the PUC came in and said, we already did a report on that. They required that they do a report on all of these things. They said, we sent it to you December 1st. And our recommendations was that we pretty much got it covered, that people are not getting randomly cut off. And I've talked to the proposer of the bill. And she told me that the person that had asked her to do it, it was actually, she was paying her utilities and her rent, and her landlord didn't pay the utility bills. So there's probably nothing we can do to help. And the big loss was the food in her refrigerator, in the summer. And we were told there are protocols. We don't shut it off when it's cold. We don't shut it off if you're on any kind of a medical required device or if you're handicapped. And they said in the summer, they were just calling the utilities when it hit very hot. In Vermont, that's probably 85, but said, they just asked the utilities, and the utilities just, they don't shut it off. Nobody wants to have somebody's grandmother die because they shut down their air conditioning. But, so if we do nothing, it's probably covered. This is kind of belts and suspenders that said, so write a rule for what you're already doing. So that's how we got to this point. Any questions? Any concerns? So once we hear from VEPSA, if they don't raise any concerns, and we'll invite the other utilities in, we have, we'll invite probably VEPSA and Green Mountain Power in. Those, and just one or two other.
Co-ops.
The co-ops are VEPSA.
No,
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 Andrew
you said Andrew Cohen?
Yeah.
She's the Vermont Electric Co-op. She's one of the co-ops.
Okay,
That's are the municipals. the municipal
okay,
electric
that's who I wanted. So we'll get Andrea, we'll get VEPSA. And
Can I ask
yeah,
Maria a question? Have you, in the 3.300 rule, does it include this yet?
No.
It does not. It's just what their practice apparently.
Understand, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
yeah, this puts into statute what they say they already do.
Codifies current practice.
That's right. Makes us feel better. But also says if somebody else comes in, decides to change the practice,
Right.
they can. Okay. That was easy. All right, and Maria, I know captive insurance was in, I was tied up in the pro tem's office. But, and it's an H bill, but we've been through it, so I thought if you could just walk us.
Do a quick
If
refresher.
if you have a section by section, we can go through it and.
Yeah.
Really fast.
I do, and I do have a section by section summary, which I can also send to you, or you can
Okay.
post, but this.
Senator Chittenden is going to report.
Yep, yep. So very quickly, it's not very long. The first two
It's not
sections,
long.
not this one, but you'll have another
That happened.
DFR bill coming. So this is only
They're
happening.
always that thick.
That's on its way, or it's here.
Wow, we must be a maturing industry.
So this just the first section concerns risk retention groups. These are entities that are formed to kind of manage their liability risks. They're owned by their members.
Did we already walk through this?
Yeah, but I don't think Senator Cummings was there, so we're just doing.
Well,
very-
I think we're just, I wanted to do just a quick overview. So that we knew what we were voting on when we voted out.
Sure. And so what this does is basically specify that no risk retention group shall make a loan to or investment in its member or affiliates of its members. So just ensuring that the reserves are there, to cover their claims, and it's not being lent out.
Yeah, all the way down to.
Yep.
Somebody unbeknownst.
Which is not a common occurrence apparently, that requires the commissioner's approval. And as I remember correctly, I think there's only maybe one. outstanding law. So section 2 also concerns risk retention groups. And it's a little bit longer, but actually the changes are pretty much conform with existing practice. So under current law, you'll see these are annual reports, financial statements that are required for all types of captive entities. There's a carve out that says risk retention groups. You report like all insurance companies, general insurance companies do. So the proposal here is to strike that and now include their reporting requirements in the statute, which we'll look at. So part of it's just moving the requirements. And then also, just so I don't forget, you'll see there's some stricken language there, but it's actually moved to a different subsection, but this concerns confidentiality provisions. It stays the same. Risk retention groups are not subject to confidentiality, as are other captives. They're not, and that's just a federal law requirement. So all you'll see in subsections E and F are essentially, I think it pretty much conforms with their current reporting requirements, the annual reports, the form that they must be submitted in to the commissioner and to NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And then greater specificity in subsection F of with their quarterly report filings, when they need to be made by. But again, this is what they're doing currently, just reporting. Gives the authority in subsection G for the commissioner to adopt rules. The commissioner thinks additional filing requirements are necessary. And then that subsection I is the moved confidentiality provision, same as existing law.
Okay.
And then the last section pertains to sponsored captive insurance companies and their protected cells. And
That's higher Hardin building.
yes, it is. And so this is basically just saying that when the protected cells submit their kind of business plans for what they want to do, they have to specify a certain amount of reserves that they have to hold, etc. And this is just a filing. After they commence business, they basically need to affirm with the commissioner that they did what they were supposed to do. And that is a statement that's filed and it has to be signed by, it's an unincorporated cell, then the sponsored captive insurance company officers. If it's an incorporated protected cell, the president, secretary, and if it's an LLC, 2 individuals authorized by the governing board.
Okay.
All of
This, because last year, the captive insurance came in the DFR housekeeping, but it wasn't overly extensive. So this does seem to be maturing. Because every year, for how many years, we've had different forms and different kinds and different. So yeah, this is for captive insurance, a pretty simple bill committee. Any questions on this one? It also never gets questions. All right, this one we can vote out.
I'll make a motion to vote on draft number 1.1 of page 649 of 11326.
So we deal with as move that we approve the captive insurance bill draft 1.1 of page 49. Dated 1/13/26 at 3:10 p.m. Is there any discussion? Are there any amendments?
Just concurring.
Pardon?
Just concurring.
We're just concurring. All right, is that your motion, Senator?
That is my motion.
All right, Senator would really move that we concur. So if we're just concurring, I'm going to say, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. I'm hearing that as 700. And the secretary is standing behind you, so please write quickly.
He showed up. He showed up just at
This
the right
room
moment.
is full.
Yeah.
I think we knew what you were doing.
He showed up.
Okay, we've got the bill. We concur. It's an easy one.
We concurred and we voted on.
And we voted on it.
What's the effective date for that?
Okay, so I think you need to just sign that. And they can take it up. That, believe it or not, is it for today, but we did